My name is Catherine Allen. I'm 28, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the family's invisible scaffolding, the one they call when the Wi Fi blinks, when passports need renewing, or when someone forgets the travel insurance. I've always been the dependable one, the quiet backbone, the person everyone assumes will handle the chaos so they don't have to. That afternoon, standing in my parents' hallway with a grocery bag in hand, the air thick with the scent of vanilla and simmering dinner, I realized something terrible. I had been played. You told me the family vacation was postponed, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Clara, my older sister, didn't flinch. Her glossy nails tapped lazily on her phone screen as she smirked at me, that smug, condescending smile I've known since childhood. It was postponed, she said sweetly. For you? I felt the floor tilt beneath me. 2 weeks ago, she told me it was too expensive, that we should aim for next season. And yet, here I was, staring at suitcases lined up at the door, the kitchen filled with laughter, my parents joking, my brother bragging about his hotel upgrade, and Clara barking orders about packing outfits. They were leaving today, and I wasn't invited. Unreal, I muttered, setting down the groceries. You all lied to me. My mother barely looked up from her tea. My father didn't even glance away from his phone. Clara just shrugged. You've been so busy lately, she said, faux sympathetic. We thought you'd appreciate the time to yourself. Busy? I was the one who booked the villa, the one who sent Clara the deposit when her card was maxed out, the one who paid for travel insurance and renewed passports. And they weren't just going without me. They planned to cut me out entirely. I see, I said quietly. So I cover all the costs, and then I get told to enjoy peace and quiet at home? Clara raised an eyebrow, clearly enjoying herself. You always complain about how we stress you out. We were just doing you a favor. Her words, casual and patronizing, lit a fire inside me. But I didn't scream. I didn't flip the kitchen table. Instead, I smiled. A small, calm smile that probably scared her more than any outburst could. Okay, I said, grabbing my keys. Enjoy your little trip. Her expression faltered. You're not mad? I chuckled softly. No, I'm done. Clara's amusement wavered for a fraction of a second, then vanished into disbelief. The game had begun. What hurt the most wasn't the trip itself. It was that I had paid for every single part of it, 6 months ago. Clara had called me in her usual fake, let's connect mood, showing me a gorgeous villa with an infinity pool and private beach access. She painted the perfect picture, wrapped in velvet words. I thought maybe we could go in together, she'd said sweetly. Just a little gift for the family. I should have said no. I didn't. I wired the deposit, then covered surprise fees, flights, rental cars, upgrades. When my parents heard, they smiled like royalty. Very mature of you, my mom said. Good to see you finally stepping up. My dad added nothing, just expectation. No offer to help, just me, the family piggy bank. And yet, I didn't complain. Not then. I told myself it was for the memories, for some illusion of family. But standing there now, with the suitcase-laden hallway and the laughter spilling from the kitchen, I saw the truth. I wasn't family. I was a means to an end, a wallet, a placeholder, invisible until they needed me. Clara's plan had been simple: lie to my face, manipulate my parents, and exclude me completely. Even a casual question a week before the trip had been met with a lie. Oh, we're postponing until August, she said, calm and sweet. But she hadn't postponed anything. She had engineered my invisibility. And now, as I stood in their home, grocery bag in hand, something inside me shifted. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was something colder, sharper, quieter, a wire snapping loose inside me. I walked out without a word. That night, I didn't sleep, didn't cry, didn't shout. I planned. I opened every app, every login, every reservation. I found everything. The villa, the car rental, the catering, the pool heating. Everything was in my name. They had wanted me invisible, but they forgot one thing. I held the keys to the kingdom. I began quietly. Changed the locks. Canceled grocery deliveries. Blocked their numbers. Polite emails to the concierge. Guests under this reservation have been removed. And then came the luggage. Clara's genius plan had a flaw. She asked me to book everything. I logged into the international baggage service. Scheduled delivery? Yes, but I changed the location. Morgus Island Goat Farm, Greece. Yes, remote, mountainous, middle of nowhere. Instructions attached. Owner prefers no contact. Leave bags by the fence. Don't disturb the animals. I laughed until I had to sit down. My sister's designer luggage, my parents' carefully packed belongings, all en route to a goat sanctuary. Non-refundable, no changes allowed. By the time they arrived, they'd have nothing but hand luggage. I leaned back for the first time in years. For the first time, I didn't feel like the fool. I was the storm. And the family's chaos? That would be coming. The next morning, I woke to silence in my apartment. No buzzing phones, no pleading text, no frantic calls from my sister Clara or my parents. For the first time in years, the world felt like it belonged to me alone, and the thought made a strange, exhilarating shiver run down my spine. I sipped coffee at the window, sunlight streaming in, and let my mind replay every detail of the previous day. Clara, smug and confident, completely unaware that her perfectly orchestrated plan had been foiled before she even stepped on the plane. My parents, too, had assumed I'd stay silent, as I always had. But I wasn't silent anymore. Not me. Not Catherine Allen. I began with logistics. Every service they'd arranged, every luxury perk they'd assumed would be theirs, I methodically checked and edited. Villa access? Revoked. Grocery delivery? Canceled. Private chef and pool heating? Disabled. Chauffeur? Informed politely that no pickup was required. Every button I clicked, every line I typed, felt like reclaiming a little piece of my life stolen over the years. And then there was the luggage. Clara had been so proud of her careful planning, so certain that every delicate item would arrive safely at the villa. That pride was now my weapon. My fingers hovered over the edit delivery location field, and I typed slowly, deliberately, smiling as I did. Morgus Island Goat Farm, Greece. Owner prefers no contact. Leave bags by the fence. Do not disturb animals. Yes, every bag. Designer clothes, electronics, my mother's essential oils, my father's golf clubs, Clara's handbags, all en route to a remote goat sanctuary, far from luxury, far from civilization. I double-checked everything. Non-refundable. No changes. The chaos would be poetic. I imagined their faces as the villa doors opened and they found nothing but what they had carried themselves. The absurdity made me laugh until tears pricked my eyes. But laughter was only half of it. The other half was calm satisfaction, the icy certainty that I had finally tipped the scales. It wasn't just about the money, though it stung to think of all the bills I'd quietly covered for years. It was about recognition, about finally being seen, not as a wallet, not as a placeholder, not as someone invisible in their lives, ready to absorb inconvenience without complaint. I checked my accounts again, verifying all the transactions. Every flight, every upgrade, every meal service, it was all mine, all under my name, all traceable to me. They had planned to erase my contribution, erase me entirely from the story of this trip, but I had ensured I was the author of the final act. Then I paused, thinking about Clara, her smug, self-assured face, the way she laughed at my supposed naivety. That face was about to crumble, and my parents? They had smiled at her deceit, given it their blessing, and in doing so, had also underestimated me. The morning stretched on as I carefully plotted the cascade of consequences. I imagined the texts flooding in, the frantic phone calls, the gasps of disbelief. And I smiled, because I didn't need to respond to any of it, not immediately, not emotionally. The beauty of it was in the waiting, in letting them feel the full weight of the quiet storm I had unleashed. By noon, I had finished my preparations. Every digital lock, every canceled delivery, every reassigned reservation was in place. I leaned back in my chair, letting the sunlight warm my face, and felt a strange, almost dizzying sense of liberation. The years of invisible labor, the endless cycle of giving until exhaustion, the expectation that I would absorb chaos and come out smiling, it all felt like it had been lifted. I allowed myself a moment to reflect on the past. Clara had always known how to dress her selfishness in velvet words. My parents had always smiled at my compliance as if it were a virtue, and I, dependable, quiet, careful, had let it slide time and time again. But no more. This villa, this vacation, this elaborate web of deceit and manipulation. It was the culmination of years of invisible pain, and now I had reclaimed it. I imagined the villa in Greece, my family arriving with excitement, their hands full of carefully packed luggage, only to find that every single expectation had been quietly sabotaged. Their meticulous plans, their assumptions of control, they would unravel with every email, every note, every misplaced suitcase. It wasn't just revenge, it was poetry, it was justice. And as I sipped my coffee, sunlight catching in the rim of the cup, I felt a strange, calming power, the power of finally being seen, the power of finally standing up without yelling, without tears, without pleading. In that quiet, sunlit morning, I realized something else too. This was not only about punishing them, it was about teaching myself that I had limits, boundaries, and the right to enforce them. That even in the chaos of family expectations, I could choose peace, could choose cleverness, could choose satisfaction over outrage. And yet, somewhere beneath the calm, I felt the pulse of anticipation. The storm had been set in motion. The chaos would follow. Clara, my parents, they didn't know the first thing about what was coming. And I didn't need to tell them. They would discover it all on their own. I leaned back, taking another slow sip of coffee, letting the heat fill me. A strange serenity settled over me. I had spent my life being careful, quiet, and invisible. Now I was intentional, deliberate, and in control. The villa would soon become the stage for revelation, and I would be watching from my quiet corner, smiling softly, as they finally learned the cost of underestimating me. For the first time in years, I felt alive. The villa in Greece was silent, serene, and utterly devoid of the family chaos Clara had anticipated. But back home, the storm was about to hit. 3 days later, they returned, sunburned, exhausted, defeated. I was sitting on my porch, sipping lemonade, enjoying the quiet that had become my new normal, when I saw them pull into the driveway. Clara jumped out first, hair a messy bun, designer sunglasses slightly askew, her hands flailing as she stormed toward me. You, she snapped, stopping abruptly, caught between rage and disbelief. What is wrong with you? I remained seated, calm, raising my glass slightly in acknowledgement. Clara, I said, nodding politely, how was the farm? Her scream could have shattered glass. We were humiliated. Do you have any idea what you've done? Yes, I replied evenly. Exactly. My mother followed, dragging 2 overstuffed carry-ons, her expression a mix of guilt and fury. You embarrassed us, she shouted. I gave you a taste of how I felt for the last 10 years, I said calmly. My father lingered near the trunk, pretending to untangle straps, eyes averted. Clara, still trembling with rage, pointed a finger at me. You went nuclear over nothing. You're just bitter because we didn't want to spend a week with your depressing energy. I stood slowly, setting my glass down, making every word land with precision. You lied to me, Clara. You stole my money. You used me like a credit card with a mute button, and then celebrated leaving me behind. Don't stand there crying about depressing energy when you built an entire vacation on betrayal. She opened her mouth to argue, then hesitated. And you, I said, turning to my mother, you sat there and let her do it. Lied to my face, covered for her, all because she's your golden girl, and I'm just the placeholder. The invisible one. Her lips trembled. We didn't mean... Never mind, I interrupted. You never mean it. That's the problem. It's never real, never direct, just expectations. And now you're shocked that I finally stopped playing along. A tense silence settled. Then, from behind the SUV, a quiet voice spoke. She's right, said Jonathan, Clara's ex, who had quietly arrived without me noticing. You've treated everyone poorly. Gaslighting, guilt-tripping, pretending to be the victim. And Clara, you manipulated all of us. Catherine was the only one who ever stood up to you. Clara's face went red, her mouth opening and closing as if she had no words. Jonathan continued, recounting the texts, the plans, and the orchestrated exclusion. I watched them crumble. Clara, my parents, they had underestimated me for years, and now they were forced to face the consequences. I have done nothing but try to keep this family together, Clara hissed, her voice cracking. No, I snapped, calm but sharp. You've done everything to keep me out of it. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Then, with a subtle, almost imperceptible smile, I added, I'm done. My mother's voice was small, pleading. You can't just walk away. You can keep your games, your hierarchy, your silence. I'm not part of it anymore. I grabbed my pre-packed suitcase and turned to the doorway. By the way, I added lightly, the goat who slept on your bag? His name is Hector. He sends his regards. Then I left. Walking away, I felt a strange liberation. For years, I had played the role they expected, the dependable, quiet one. Now, for the first time, I was intentional. I wasn't reacting, I was deciding. For days after, there was silence. No calls, no frantic text, no attempts at emotional manipulation. Just quiet. I filled the hours with myself. Indulgent breakfasts, long walks, reading by the window, letting the sunlight warm my skin. I had reclaimed my life from the family that had treated me as invisible. And in that silence, I realized the most profound truth. They could never understand me fully because I had changed. I wasn't their Catherine anymore. I was someone who had boundaries, self-respect, and control. Even when my family attempted small reconciliations, a birthday card, a tentative text, they were met with calm, intentional boundaries. I didn't respond in anger or guilt. I didn't have to. I was free. For the first time, I understood what freedom felt like. Not the kind bought with money or vacations, but the kind earned with patience, intelligence, and a refusal to be invisible any longer. The mornings after the confrontation were quiet, truly quiet. No buzzing phone, no desperate messages, no strings pulling at me. I had reclaimed my space, my time, my life. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty for it. I spent hours on my porch, sipping coffee and listening to the soft hum of the city below. The light breeze through my open windows felt like a long-forgotten melody. For so long, I had been invisible, the dependable scaffolding holding up everyone else's chaos. Now I was visible, deliberate, untouchable. I didn't check emails. I didn't respond to social media messages. I didn't need validation from a family that had spent years exploiting my patience. Instead, I focused on me. I decluttered my apartment, tossing out the weight of old expectations and obligations. Each item that left my apartment was a small exhale, a tiny liberation. A week later, a small, unexpected message appeared on Instagram. It was from someone I barely remembered, one of Clara's old friends. "Hi, I just wanted to say, I always admired you. You were the only one who ever really listened. You deserved better." I stared at the screen for a long moment. It wasn't anger. It wasn't pride. It was peace, a quiet acknowledgement that I had done something difficult and right. A few days after that, Jonathan, Clara's ex, reached out. "Catherine," he said quietly over the phone, "I just wanted to say, you weren't crazy. You were the only one who ever stood up to her. You set boundaries. You broke the cycle." I didn't need anything from him. I just listened. And in his words, I found a strange sense of affirmation, not from my family, not from my sister, not from anyone who had once tried to control me, but from the simple, unspoken truth that I had acted with integrity and strength. It was a crack in the wall, a small window through which light leaked in, letting me see that my liberation wasn't just about revenge. It was about rediscovering myself, my voice, my power. And so I took a bold, quiet step. I bought a ticket to Iceland, just for myself. No one knew. No one needed to know. I didn't post it online. I didn't announce it. I went alone, carrying only my essentials and my sense of freedom. Standing beneath the northern lights, ribbons of green and violet dancing silently across the sky, I whispered one word to the cold night. Free. I wasn't coming back, not to the person I had been, not to the family that had never seen me, not to the life of quiet servitude and invisible labor. I had stepped out of the storm they had created, leaving it behind in the chaos of their own making. Even when they tried, the birthday card with a $25 bill, Clara's tentative apology texts, they couldn't reach me. I was beyond their reach, beyond their manipulation, beyond the cycle of expectation and guilt. I realized something essential. Liberation isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It isn't revenge, though revenge may be a step along the way. Liberation is quiet, deliberate, and absolute, and I had it. As I walked through the icy Icelandic landscape, feeling the cold sting of the wind against my face, I understood that the life I wanted wasn't tied to anyone else's approval. I was myself, loudly, sharply, unapologetically, and that was enough. Weeks passed, and life settled into a rhythm that felt entirely mine. The villa, the chaos, the betrayal, all of it became memories that no longer had power over me. I had stepped out of the storm, leaving it behind in the hands of those who had created it. My mornings were quiet, intentional. I made coffee for myself in a mug I actually liked. I walked through the city without a checklist, without an invisible weight of obligation pressing on my shoulders. I explored small cafes, bought flowers for my apartment, and sometimes indulged in a ridiculously expensive dessert, knowing I didn't owe an explanation to anyone. Clara tried, in small ways, to re-enter my life. A text, an Instagram message, a vague apology. I read them once, archived them, and then let them drift into silence. My parents sent a birthday card. Again, $25 tucked inside. A small gesture that didn't erase years of invisible labor or manipulation. I smiled softly, set it aside, and let it be. Their attempts no longer held sway over me. The lessons I carried were far more valuable. I had learned that boundaries are not cruel, they are essential. That standing up for yourself, even against those you love, is not betrayal, it is survival. That freedom is not given, it is taken, quietly, deliberately, and with intention. I spent one afternoon at a small bookstore leafing through journals and novels when a young woman approached me. "Excuse me," she said gently, "I just wanted to say, I've always admired how you handle yourself. You seem unshakable." I blinked, surprised. A stranger, yet somehow seeing me more clearly than my family ever had. I smiled softly. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. Not the hollow thanks of obligation, but the genuine recognition that I was finally living on my own terms. Travel became my sanctuary. Iceland, with its northern lights, had been the first step. Next came quiet trips to coastal towns, mountains, and small cities. No social media posts, no expectation, no performance. Just me, my own company, and the hum of life outside of other people's dramas. Sometimes I thought of Clara, of my parents, of the villa and the goat farm that had been the final act of long, slow karma. I didn't feel triumph. I felt closure. I didn't want them to suffer forever. I wanted myself to thrive, and thrive I did. The old Catherine, the one who quietly absorbed betrayal, who bent herself to others' expectations, who stayed calm while the world ignored her contributions, was gone. In her place was someone deliberate, careful, and fierce in her own right. Someone who knew her worth and refused to let it be eroded by the entitlement of others. And so I moved forward, step by step, choice by choice. I made plans that were entirely my own. I cultivated friendships, passions, and experiences without fear of judgment or obligation. I laughed more freely. I cried when I needed to, not when expected. I was, for the first time, fully present in my own life. I think back to the porch in my apartment, to the coffee in my hands, to the sun shining through the windows. I remember the quiet joy, the small smile that finally wasn't forced. I was free. And I had built this freedom from the fragments of my old life, from the ashes of their expectations, from the courage to finally say, no more. Sometimes life doesn't give you justice or recognition. Sometimes the world expects you to bend, to absorb, to comply. But freedom, real freedom, is earned. And I had earned it. Not with anger or violence, but with patience, intelligence, and deliberate action. Catherine Allen, 28, was no longer just the dependable one. She was her own storm, her own sanctuary, and her own reward. And in the quiet of her life, she finally understood being unapologetically herself was the greatest act of courage she had ever performed.